Well, welcome back to my studio. Last time I gave you an assignment to work on a portrait of some sort. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about finding your own voice. Now, that's the first thing I tell you on the very first day of class, is that the primary objective of every project we do in my classroom is to find your own voice. And some of you might struggle really trying to figure out what exactly does it mean to find your own voice. Well, I don't, unlike a lot of other teachers, in fact, one of the reasons maybe some of you like my class, at least in the beginning, is because I don't really tell you what to do. I don't give specific assignments per se. I give you some ideas and things to think about, but I tell you I want you to find your own voice. Now, at first, when you hear that, oh, great, you get to do whatever you want in Mr. Adkins' class, a lot of times people think, oh, great, that's going to be a lot of fun, until it's time to actually do it. And then all of a sudden, you find out that the burden of figuring out what exactly it is to do is up to you. And that's where some of you start to have trouble, and that's where some of you sort of sit and start to daydream and get off task a little bit, because it's it's a little bit hard figuring out exactly what to do when there's nobody telling you exactly what to do. So even though it might sound like a lot of fun and really easy to do whatever you want, it's actually a little bit tougher because you actually have to think a little bit more. So I'm going to show you a trick that I've used in the past. In fact, I think some of you I've even shown this to in the past. It's something called concept mapping or mind mapping, and I think maybe in some of your other classes you've done some variations of this as well. Now, basically with mind mapping or concept mapping, you start with an idea, okay? Something that you think, you know what, I think I should address this idea in a work of art. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but I think this is something worthy of addressing in a work of art, something that I want to investigate, but I'm not quite sure what it is. And let's say whenever I give like a little project or a concept that I want you to investigate, one of my favorite ones is justice, the concept of justice, to do a work of art about justice. Now, a lot of people, if left on their own, they just look for some sort of symbolism. They end up doing something kind of trite, and trite means something that's kind of simple and not very complex and very common and not very surprising, everyday, sort of normal, boring kind of thing is something trite. So if you're an artist, you don't want your artwork to be identified as trite. But a lot of times, if I give a student an assignment to, say, do a work of art about justice, well, there's lots of different things, little symbols. And that's what people usually resort to, is symbolism when they really can't think of anything. So one of the most common sort of symbols might be a scale for justice. Something like that. Okay, and then that would represent, you could do something scales, and that would symbolize justice. That's you see that. In fact, the statue, a lot of the statues you see outside of courthouses show a statue of a woman holding a scale and stuff like that. Where's my eraser? I've got an eraser here somewhere. Okay, so, but things like that usually end up being kind of trite. So if you really want to do an interesting work of art, okay, you show a little scale like that and people automatically think of justice, and so it's not very hard, but the more interesting work really requires the viewer to think a little bit more. So one way that I've found to come up with something on a topic that doesn't like give all the answers to the viewer right away and gives them something to think about and gets a little bit deeper, and more importantly helps you find your own voice so that you make it your own, is something called concept mapping or mind mapping. And in a way it's kind of like free association, where I don't know if you've ever played this game before, where somebody says a word and then you say the first word that comes to your mind after that. For example, if somebody said fire, then the first thing you might think of might be hot, possibly, you know, or if somebody says school, you might think homework might be the first thing to come to your mind. That's called free association, the first thing that sort of comes to your mind. And concept mapping or mind mapping is kind of like that. So one of the topics that I like to talk about with people and give as an assignment a lot of times, this is not going to be your assignment, it's just an assignment that I've given in the past, and it makes for a good example, is the concept of justice. So you start off by just writing justice down, put a little circle around it like that. So that's the primary concept. So then you start thinking, what comes to your mind when you think of the word justice? Okay, well, justice, you know, the first word that might come to my mind would be court, like a courtroom. That's where justice is found, supposedly, ideally. That's the case, you know. And then, okay, so justice, what's another word that might come to my mind? Fairness. I mean, the whole idea of justice is coming to a fair resolution. So fairness is something that might come to my mind. All right, and then let's see. Justice, well, I mean, we have laws, okay? Because if you find yourself in court, it probably has something to do with maybe a law. Let's see, and then it's kind of like fairness, but let's say equality. Let's put that down here, equality. Okay, and fairness and equality are kind of the same. What's another one? Let's see, justice, well, the basic concept of right and wrong. Right and wrong. Justice is to help us sort of figure that out, okay? As a society, anyway. What would be another? Okay, how many do we have here? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's probably enough for now. Now, the next trick is to pick one of these that you might find kind of interesting. What do you think of? For example, laws. What do you think of? Well, first thing I think of is, you don't follow the laws, you're going to have to deal with the police. Okay, so that's something that I get from laws. Court. Okay, courtroom. Well, let's see. Here again, another sort of like symbol is the gavel that the I think that's spelled right, G-A-V-E-L, gavel, that the judge will pound on his desktop. Another, a jury. Okay. Oh, speaking of the gavel, the judge himself, judge. Oops. A judge. Okay, so you get the idea. And then let's see if we can think of some others. Right and wrong. Okay. Okay. These right here are really where I think we're going to go. Okay. Fairness. Well, look, to make things fair, you come up with rules. So you want people to play by the rules. Okay. Now, let's talk about finding your own voice. These are pretty obvious things, and things I sort of came up with these things because these are things that I think we all can relate to. If you really want to make your artwork interesting and you want to find your own voice, make it really about you, this is where you really want to start truly free associating and come up with a few ideas or concepts out here that other people wouldn't necessarily think of. And one of the things that when I think of fairness or equality, either one of these, okay, something that sort of comes to my mind is cupcakes. Cupcakes. I know my handwriting is not good, but that says cupcakes. Okay. And you're probably right now scratching your head saying, what the heck does that have to do with justice or even fairness or equality? Well, I know what that means. And it's something very personal. In fact, we talk about different artist sources for a work of art, and when we talked about Jacob Lawrence and how he did all these paintings of carpenters working in his neighborhood and these sort of community things based upon personal experience. This is something, if I did a body of work on that, my artist source would primarily be personal experience, because this comes from a personal experience and comes from my first real dealings with the ideas of fairness and equality and injustice as a really small child. And it happened when I was very young. And in fact, I lived with my sister and my mother, and we weren't rich by any means. So whenever my mother would go grocery shopping, so I'm sure she was always trying to be kind of frugal, and occasionally she might find something that would be a nice treat for me and my sister, you know, maybe a cupcake or something. And but being on a budget, that meant she usually would only buy one, and then my sister and I would split it. So so then the dilemma came. You know, I think maybe the first time she did this, she might have just gotten a cupcake and took out a knife and cut it in half and gave my sister one and gave me the other. And you've heard the story, the grass is always greener on the other side. I'm sure that either my sister would look at my piece or I'd look at my sister's piece, and we would each be convinced that the other's piece was bigger than the other, and it wasn't fair because the other person got a bigger piece. So my mother came up with an interesting solution for dealing with this whenever there was something that my sister and I had to share, like a cupcake. She came up with this rule, or this procedure, or a way of doing things, where she would let one of us cut it in half, and then the other one, who was not the one that cut it in half, would get to choose which piece they wanted. So that meant that the person, well, I was very, very young, so the first time I had an opportunity to cut it in half, I might have been thinking, well, I want to get a larger piece, so I'm going to cut one piece a little bit larger, and then, you know, hopefully my sister will pick the smaller piece and I'll have the larger piece. And then, you know, maybe if I had done that and I did that, and of course my sister's not going to pick the smaller piece, so she would have picked a larger piece. So I would have gone, oh, that didn't work. So then I would realize if I really wanted to cover myself in this situation, I would have to really, really work hard to make sure I made those two pieces as evenly as I possibly could. Okay. And then once I really figured out the process, I would realize really the smart thing to do is to let my sister cut it so that I could ultimately choose whichever piece, in my mind anyway, I thought was the biggest. So anyway, that's why that word, cupcakes, comes to mind, starting from the word justice. I might not have thought of cupcakes when the concept of justice first came around, but by the time I sort of came up with fairness and equality, I would think, oh, how did I learn about fairness? And that's something that's very personal to me. And so that might be where I might want to start doing a body of work based upon the idea of justice. Now you might say, okay, if I just did a painting of a cupcake cut in half or a bunch of cupcakes or something like that, people would look at that and they would say, what does that have to do with justice? Okay, and you know what? There's not really anything wrong with that. This is art. We want people to think, and the most interesting art out there, for me, has a little bit of mystery to it and causes the viewer to question what really is that all about. So you don't necessarily have to have the answers in your work of art, but it's always interesting. The most interesting art actually asks questions rather than provides answers. Now, I've talked about a body of work a lot, and when I tell you, when you tell me, oh, I'm done with something, I tell you an artist is never done, because we do what's called a body of work, and we do several paintings, drawings, sculptures, and things like that based upon an idea or a concept. And maybe the first painting or sculpture or whatever I did based upon cupcakes might be really hard for people to sort of get the idea that, oh, this is about fairness or equality. However, once I started really investigating it and I started doing a body of work, it would sort of like be pieces of a puzzle that people could then start putting together. And then as people looked at my body of work as a whole, they might be able to put some of those pieces of that puzzle together and figure out, oh, he's talking about fairness and equality and maybe more so the overall concept of justice. So this is where artwork gets really, really interesting and really fun to look at, and get to know individual artists and recognize their voice, and then you as an artist finding your own voice. So that's where I want this to be, that's what I want you to be thinking about right now. Now, I don't usually tell you what to do, and I'm not going to tell you what to do. However, I am going to give you an idea or a concept that's very relevant. And I want you to explore this, do a concept map on it. And but as you do it, especially as you get out to those second and third levels, I want you to be thinking about how you personally relate to this subject. Okay? So going to be something that's on all of our minds right now, very relevant, and something that I know is a big part of all of our lives right now, and that's the coronavirus. Okay, so that's where we're starting. Now, with your concept maps, where are you going to go? Okay, this first layer, you know, these might be pretty obvious things, something that maybe all of us would think about. I'm not even going to suggest any of those. There's some pretty obvious ones out there. But especially as you get out into some of these others, I want you to be really trying to make it personal. Okay? Something that wouldn't be common to us all. Okay? And once you come up with maybe this one right here, that's the one, you know what, that I think is really interesting. And that's the one that I think is really going to help me find my own voice as it relates to me personally, a personal relevance to the coronavirus. So we're looking for a personal relevance to the coronavirus in your work of art. And maybe this one, whatever that is. It might be cupcakes, who knows? But whatever that is, I want you to then take that and then think about how you can do a work of art. Don't worry that first work of art, drawing or painting, whatever you have access to right now, whatever you can do, don't worry about whether or not people are going to think of coronavirus right away. Just think about that. And I want you to do a work of art based upon that, whatever that is.